Hey, Dwell, good to be with you all this week. My name is Lydia, if I have not met you, and I'm so excited to be together. Whether you're meeting on a Sunday morning, afternoon, evening, or on one of our Tuesday homes, we're so glad that you're joining us. Or maybe you're out on vacation right now doing something fun with your family, tuning in. We're so grateful to be together in whatever capacity that looks like. So a couple of things as we start, we want to let you know that Jubilee is coming up if you haven't already marked your calendars for June 5th. And at Jubilee, which is our all-church gathering, a special component of this one will be baby dedications, and we've already got one little one that reached out to us that wanted to do that. So if there's more little ones that have been born, or maybe are a couple of years old and you've just never had the opportunity to do that, maybe they're 10 years old and you've never had the opportunity to do that, we would love to dedicate your baby or your child at our next Jubilee. You can reach out to me, Lydia, at dwellpnw.com, and let me know. The next thing is, all of you have hopefully seen by now our summer calendar. And you would have seen on there that we are going to be going to a Hops game. And what that means is we've already pre-purchased a bunch of tickets for the bleacher section on that night. And we are going to be sitting together. You can wear your Dwell shirts. We're going to eat together. We're just going to have a great time. And the tickets are a discounted rate. So they're only $12 a ticket. And what you would do if you're interested in joining us is go on our website under events or go into the app and sign up now and just reserve your tickets. You'd pick them up at will call. You can pay for them through the app, or you can pay for them when you get there to me or to Dwell directly. But we are really excited to do something fun together. We are already praying for good weather, so make sure you join us for the Hops game. And then the last thing is camp, kids camp. We are so excited. We've already got a bunch of kids signed up. More I know are interested in coming. Make sure you sign up the littles in your life now, as well as if you're interested in volunteering for camp. We want to let you know we'd love to have you. So please reach out to myself, again, Lydia at dwellpnw.com, or send me a text if you already have my phone number and say, I want to help. We are going to have a great time together, and it's only a really small commitment. It's from 9 to 1 on that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So it's not an all-day thing. We have different types of ways you can help, maybe prepping stuff beforehand or helping with the barbecue on Friday night. But we are so excited to put on an incredible camp and make memories for the kids of Dwell. So make sure that you are part of that if you want to be. So with that, we are going to go into Joshua chapter 3, and this last week, my husband Kyle took us through Joshua chapter 2 and the story of Rahab. And let me just remind you that there's two spies that were sent out to Jericho. And having followed Joshua's orders, Joshua's the commander to check out this land and this city that they were about to take on. And they weren't discovered because of this woman Rahab's help. And now they're coming back. They give their report to Joshua. Their hearts were bursting with joy. And they said in Joshua 2:24, the Lord has handed over the entire land to us. Everyone who lives in the land is also panicking because of us. And as soon as Joshua heard this news, he was so excited. This is what he'd been waiting to hear. He sent out runners throughout the camp, because remember, they're all camped waiting to find out what their next move is going to be, announcing that the first thing the next morning, all of the camp would break and pitch their tents on the banks of the Jordan River. They would be one step closer to entering the promised land. Now, before we actually start reading chapter 3, I want to show you a photo of the Jordan River. It's going to come up on your screen, so you can kind of just get this accurate picture as we talk through and read through chapter 3, because there's a lot of different types of rivers, sizes of rivers, and it might be nice to see what are we actually talking about, what are we actually looking at here. You can see it's actually pretty beautiful with a lot of shrubbery and kind of rainforest looking plants around it. So the Jordan River, also referred to as the River Jordan, it's a 156-mile river that flows north to south. So I looked this up. It's very similar to the Willamette River in length and direction. So the river that we're seeing, this Jordan River, feeds into the Sea of Galilee, which if you're into the scriptures, you've heard of the Sea of Galilee before. And it continues down to the Dead Sea, the one that has all the salt in it that you can go float on top of. You've probably heard of that as well. So this is their next stop on their adventure, is the Jordan River. And that is where we pick up today, Joshua chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and open up to that together, and we will read. Joshua 3, 1 through 6. Early in the morning, Joshua rose and set out from Shittim, a great name, with all the Israelites, and they came to the Jordan. They camped there before crossing over. At the end of the 3 days of camping, the officers went throughout the camp and commanded the people, "When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place. Follow it, so that you may know the way you should go, for you have not passed this way before. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, a distance of about 2,000 cubits, which is about half a mile. It says, do not come any nearer to it." Then Joshua said to the people, "Sanctify yourselves," which just means make yourselves pure and holy, "for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." So Joshua is anticipating a miracle, and he says to the priests, "Take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on in front of the people." So they took up the Ark of the Covenant and went in front of the people. So the journey from where the Israelites were to getting to the edge of the Jordan River was actually really smooth, actually pretty easy. It was just a few miles of smooth ground. And so we can assume that when the Israelites finished relocating before the sun had risen, I'm sure the buzz throughout the tribes was kind of the same. Like, this is it. We're going to stand on the brink of a dream. We're going to come together, and we're going to be at a place where our parents and grandparents could only dream of. They blew it. Now this time we're going to obey. We're going to make this happen. And as you can see in these first 6 verses, there is an important character or item that was just introduced. Did you catch it? The Ark of the Covenant. If you've watched Indiana Jones, you know what I'm talking about. And there is a lot to unpack about the Ark of the Covenant, so we're going to circle back around to that in a bit. But for now, I want you all to keep reading to the end of this chapter. So in your homes, go ahead and take turns reading verses 7 through 17, so the rest of the chapter. And I want to make it interesting. So how about the person with the closest birthday to today will start you off, okay? So verses 7 through 17, go ahead and do that in your homes right now. Okay, so the Israelites just experienced a powerful, massive display of God's power. The Israelites approached the Jordan River that formed a barrier between them and their long-desired promised land. For generations, they were waiting to get to this point, and they saw something that was a little disturbing, a little dreadful. It was that the Jordan was totally uncrossable. They get to this river, and there's a simple sentence in verse 15 that we all read that gives us the picture. It says, "Now the Jordan overflows its banks throughout the harvest season." So they were in harvest season. So the gentle Jordan was now a raging river, and it had swelled to flood stage. So the currents apparently even now can reach up to 40 miles an hour when the Jordan floods. And what's more, the plain, the land that's surrounding the river was packed, as you saw in that photo, of like dense brush and growth. And this was the sight that greeted the multiple hundreds of thousands of people that had pitched their tents alongside the river, right? So they pitched their tents there for 3 days, and they're thinking, how are we going to cross this thing? So the waiting, of course, I would assume, just like anything, probably bred some anxiety, bred some fear as they're sitting there and they're hearing that rushing water every night as they go to sleep. Every man, woman, and child, I'm sure, was talking about their doubts and their fears over like the night fires. I'm just picturing them, with their dinner, just kind of thinking like, maybe the strong among us can brave a flood, but how can we cross with infants, with the sickly, with the aged, not to mention all of their possessions that are in wagons. There was just, I'm sure, a dread and an insistent no in their minds that began to form as they listened to this raging water. And I think it's obviously very easy for us to relate to that kind of emotion and thoughts, right? Like, so many of us face our own personal Jordans, like that feel so permanent and so powerful that we don't even think we can make it across. And sometimes we don't even try to make it across. Our lives begin to feel stalled. We make it to the edge of the riverbank and we're just stuck on the wrong side, right? We're just stuck on the wrong side of God's promises because we're sure we won't be able to make it through. We won't be able to cross. But the good news is, friends, as we read through this entire passage, you saw what happens. God takes a no way into a highway. He makes a way where there seems to be no way. And the great question that looms over the camp of Israel and over us today is this: will we walk by faith or by sight? Am I going to walk by faith, or am I going to walk in sight? Are you going to walk by faith, or are you going to walk by sight? That was the question, the real question that was looming over the Israelites and Joshua as they saw the circumstances in front of them. Do we really believe that God can handle this? I think about, I'm always trying to help us to understand and get to know people that are within our own church, within our own community. Like, there's stories and testimonies of people right here. We don't have to go online and read about someone else's story. We can find them in our own community. And so when I was thinking about a testimony of someone who's walking by faith, I thought of Angie. Many of you may know her. Angie is amazing. She actually 3 years ago was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And I'm gonna guess that a lot of you who are watching this right now are gonna be shocked to even hear that. And the reason you're shocked to hear that is because that woman won't let it define her. She doesn't really talk about it. She doesn't bring attention to it, not because she's afraid, but because she doesn't want to be defined by it. She believes she's walking by faith and not by sight. And for 3 years now, she's been going through therapy and fighting this battle. And she's doing it with so much faith and so much grace and so much strength. And I look at someone like Angie and I just think, wow, that is what it means. That's what it means to say, I'm not going to let this fear consume me. I'm not going to let this diagnosis scare me. I am going to walk by faith and not by sight, not by what the doctors are telling me, not by what the medical community is telling me I need to be afraid of, but by what God's telling me I need to do. And I just have so much respect for you, Angie, as you're watching this. Just know that we love you and we do continue to pray for you as you're on this journey. And you are an example to all of us of what that looks like. So Joshua 3 goes on to tell us something that's echoed throughout Scripture. What's impossible with men is made possible with God. God was about to reveal steps to the Israelites that not just they would need to follow that would help them, but to us today. Again, this is what's so powerful about Scripture. The things that he guides and coaches the Israelites on are the same things that he would guide and coach us on today. As you stand on the brink of a God-sized future, on the edge of your promised land, and you look at the obstacles that might be there, it can feel like you're facing an impossible task. But these things are no match for God, and this is just one incredible, powerful example of that. So there were 3 things, if you're taking notes, that the Israelites had to do in order to successfully cross the River Jordan. And these 3 things, I believe, again, hold true for us today. So if you're taking notes, these are some things that hold true for us today in our personal water crossings. The first one is follow the movements of God. Follow the movements of God. So we saw, right, I said we'd come back to the Ark of the Covenant. It says after 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, when you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God carried by the priests, you must leave camp and follow it. Okay, so what does this mean? And why in the heck does God care so much about a piece of furniture that he would require these people to follow him? Okay, well, we get a clue when we begin to look and really understand what the Ark of the Covenant is. So up on your screen, you'll see a picture of this ark. The Ark of the Covenant, as we believe it to have been. We don't have it in hand at some museum or anything like that. Again, that's why Indiana Jones is so great, because it makes such a great story about it. But the next picture I want you to see is what's inside of the ark. And that's the picture there. There were stone tablets that contained the 10 Commandments, a sign to all of Israel of God's desire for relationship. And remember, those 10 Commandments written on stone would have been written by Moses, the guy before Joshua. There was also a pot of bread, or manna, as they called it, which is a reminder of God's gracious provision during the 40 years when they were literally starving for food. And then there's one other item that was said to be in the ark at that time, and it was Aaron's rod. And Aaron, if you didn't know, was Moses' brother. And Aaron's rod is basically this stick, totally unassuming, that would miraculously grow leaves and almonds to validate the power of God. So there's a whole story about that if you want to go back and read that as well. It's super cool. So there's these 3 historical reminders that are inside of this beautiful Ark of the Covenant. 3 witnesses to God's love and his provision and his power. And the ark, what carried it all, it was this monument of God's faithfulness. So it made me think What are the monuments in my home or symbols in my life that remind me of God's power right now, today? Some of you have tattoos. I'm not a tattoo girl, but maybe you've got a tattoo with a verse or something that God's told you, or a picture. A lot of people have things hanging in their homes. I have a specific verse, Isaiah 61, that the Lord spoke over me at 19 years old and he uses all the time. I went onto Etsy, had someone make it for me special. I had that hanging in my home. I don't know what it is for you, but maybe you have a reminder of God's faithfulness in your house. And I know I just need those visual representations. I love them, but I need them because sometimes I forget, and it's an incredible reminder. So think of the ark as the Old Testament equivalent of Emmanuel, God with us, of Jesus. When this chest led the way, it meant that God was out in front. It meant that God was leading the way. He would, so to speak, take the first steps into the promised land. So their task, all of the Israelites, was to follow his lead, to pursue his presence, to come after him. And verse 4 lays out this procedure by which they were to do this, right? We read to keep a distance of about 1,000 yards between yourselves and the ark. So that's a good amount of space. It says, don't go near it so that you see the way to go. For you haven't gone this way before. You don't know what you're doing. Go as far back as you can while you can still keep it in sight. And why was God so particular about this distance? Well, I think it's actually just a matter of practicality. He wanted all of Israel to be able to see, remember, all of Israel, that's thousands of people, to be able to see which way God wanted them to go. And if a group of people had gotten too close and crowded in, only a handful would be able to see it. So giving it enough space meant that everyone would be able to follow it. So picture the scene. All of Israel is encamped on a sloping hill beside the Jordan River, 40-mile-per-hour river, by the way. The ark is positioned half a mile ahead of them, and everyone in the nation would be able to see it. The priests would bear it by rods, which you might remember in that first photo showing the rods on the end of the ark. They'd have it up on their shoulders, and they would stride toward the white waters of Jordan. And everybody would understand this point, that God intended for Israel to cross the Jordan with him in front. But it could only be done if they focused on and followed him. And we're all constantly entering the future moment by moment. And as we gaze ahead at our challenges, whether it be personally or as a community or as a nation, it's easy for us to conclude that we're stuck in the wilderness. So many of us just throw in the towel and we just this is just my life. I can't help it. I'm going to be stuck on the bank forever. We can't see our way clear. We don't know what's lurking under that rushing water of the Jordan. We've looked at the bottom line. We've looked at all the details. We've assessed the size of our plans. We believe God gave us these plans, but yet we conclude there's just no way, there's no human way to get across. So what do you do when you're facing the impossible? Well, are you like Peter? I think of that story where he walks out on the water, totally impossible. And how is he doing that? He's fixing his eyes on Jesus. He's able to walk on the water when he locks his eyes with Jesus. And the minute he took his eyes off Jesus, what happened? The raging sea around him began to engulf him because he remembered, well, people can't walk on water. And he started to sink. As long as we stay focused on the movements of God, we will not sink. Where he leads, we will follow. So the second thing that the Israelites had to do was successfully cross the Jordan River was this. It was get clean. And I don't mean getting in the river and washing themselves off. I mean get clean in their heart. Joshua told the people, remember that word, sanctify yourselves. So make yourself holy, make yourself pure, because the Lord will do wonders among you tomorrow. Get yourself prepared, guys, for a miracle. So this Hebrew word to prepare, to dedicate, to be holy, to be set apart, God was telling his people that if they were going to cross the uncrossable and follow the will of the Lord, then they have to be set apart to him. They have to be holy. Does that sound familiar? Because it should. Maybe you remember back just 2 chapters in Joshua 1 where he said, be strong and courageous and keep and obey all of my laws. Right? That's about part of being setting apart, being holy. So it also means, though, personal repentance of every known sin. So it's not just, keep my law, it's also confess. Be willing to share with the Lord. Tell him what you have done wrong so that you can move forward. One of the primary reasons why Israel found their way blocked over and over and over again, why the parents and grandparents of these people who are crossing the Jordan never made it as far as they did, is because Isaiah said, "Indeed, the Lord's hand is not too short to save, and his ear is not too deaf to hear, but your sin has built barriers between you and your God, and your faults have made God hide his face from you so that he does not listen." So this kind of concept of hidden sin, I'm sure it's not a new thought to any of you, but I think it's helpful to kind of put an example on it. Kyle and I have some dear friends who were dating in high school. They're now married, and they're, high school sweethearts. They had an abortion early on in their relationship while they were still in high school. And for years, this decision ate away at them. And the guilt that they felt for terminating their baby's life so that theirs wouldn't be inconvenienced was overwhelming at times. It was done in secret. It was done in private. It was just the two of them that knew about this decision, this hidden sin. And eventually, it had to come to light. They had to confess it to people in their world, their parents, and of course, most importantly, confess it to God. Until they finally named it, said, this is what happened, this is the choice we made, this is what we did, and named it for what it was, which was sin, taking the life of an unborn child, and dealing with the emotional ramifications of it. They weren't able to move on. They were constantly haunted. And today, now, this couple has 2 beautiful children, and they use their testimony to share and to support others who are in a similar situation. So for some people, it's a one-time event, that comes to your mind that you just have yet to confess, you've yet to be honest about. For others of us, maybe it's a shortcoming or a weakness that's a constant struggle. So what is it? What sin, what shortcoming, what weakness do we need to confess to God today? Like I said, it could be a one-time event, or it could be a daily struggle. Maybe what are you idolizing, or what are you using as an escape? What attitude or toxic thinking do you need to leave behind? I mean, sin looks very different for all kinds of people, but it is so clear that we are sinful human beings, and God has called us to repent from every known sin. And until we can do that, we're not going to be able to cross the Jordan to our promised land. The next thing on there is putting oneself on spiritual alert to see God at work. So there's this word really fancy called consecration in the Old Testament, and it talks about washing your clothes and abstaining from intimate relations, changing your work schedule, giving you all these things that you need to do. And this process deliberately interrupts good and normal functions in life by God's command, which is to be on spiritual alert. He was saying God's going to do amazing things among you, and you don't want to miss it by being involved in things that could distract you. So this consecration basically means I'm going to set aside the typical and put my spirit on, ready to see where God is working around me at any time so that I can join him. So in order to cross the uncrossable, we have to fix our gaze on Jesus, sensing his movements and following, and we have to set ourselves apart from sin, being constantly alert spiritually for the hand of the Lord around us. What is he up to? What is he doing? And if we have done those 2 things, so if we have gotten clean, if we have followed the movements of God, the next way that we're able to cross our personal Jordans, and that the Israelites were able to cross the Jordan River, is this: step out and stand still. Step out and stand still. So if you look at verse 8, the Lord speaks to Joshua, and he says, when you reach the edge of the waters, stand in the Jordan. And it says in verse 13, when the feet of the priests who carry the ark of the Lord come to rest in the Jordan, the waters will be cut off. The water flowing downstream will stand up in a mass. So this moment of truth has come. The priests that are carrying this Ark of the Covenant have to step out into the flood waters and then stand still right there. Don't move. The command of God to step into the water called them to get their feet wet. Faith moves you forward in God's way, in God's timing. And there will come a moment when you and I have to act on what God actually said. And if you don't, you'll never cross the Jordan. So we have to understand this. Focusing on the Lord is essential. And cleansing ourselves to the Lord is is imperative. But we're never going to cross the river. You're never going to cross the river unless you take that step of faith. Our eyes and our hearts can be right on, but if we don't move our feet to meet the challenges, if we don't put our feet in the water, we're never going to progress in God's work. We have to commit ourselves, our time, our energy, our money, our lives to what God is doing, or it isn't going to happen. But let me quickly add something else. I want you to notice an element in there that is present, and it's their trust. After they stepped out and they stood still, why? Because they were waiting on the power of God. In all their activity, they maintained dependence. Their standing still testified to the fact that everything came from God, that it wasn't their work that changed anything. It was God and God alone. They stepped out and they stood still. You know, one of the hardest commandments for me personally is found in Psalm 46:10, and it'll be up on your screen. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. And I had that actually hanging up in my office for several years because I know that I need to hear that. My tendency is to, okay, sure, I'll walk forward, but then I don't know when to stop. I don't know when to let God take the reins. Just be still, Lydia, be still. So standing near the banks of the thundering Jordan were these armed warriors. And next to them, there would have been aged men trembling, probably with their staffs or their walking sticks. There would have been just wide-eyed mothers and helpless babies and probably a bunch of crazy kids and toddlers running around. And all around were these flocks, right? Flocks of animals, and there's possessions that are waiting to move, but not until God made a way. All the people had their eyes on the ark. They were waiting in the shallows of the river. Everyone was ready. They were clean in heart, spiritually alert, watching and waiting for something that only God could do. And already the step of faith had been taken, and now they're standing still. And I just imagine like a great hush falling over the people. Just looking around and waiting. We've done everything you've told us to do, Lord. And then what happens? Then someone noticed that the water was receding. All of a sudden, it was dropping really fast. Somewhere upriver beyond their sight, we find out later, it's about 19 miles upriver to be exact, the waters are mounting into a heap. The riverbed begins to come dry. And in fact, it says it was bare all the way south to the Dead Sea, which would make sense when you think about thousands of people needing to cross this river. Now, the thunder of the river was replaced of the thunder of God's people, their footsteps just moving in this great swarm, which extended about a mile or more. This miracle, this event, this crossing of the Jordan River was so stupendous that this event actually, if you look in Psalm 114, verses 3-7, it records it. It'll be up on your screen. It says, the sea looked and fled, the Jordan turned back. The mountains skipped like rams, the hills like lambs. Why was it, sea, that you fled? Jordan, that you turned back? Mountains that you skipped like rams? Hills like lambs? Well, here's the answer. Tremble, earth, at the presence of the Lord, at the presence of the God of Jacob. I can't imagine what it would be like to see such a drastic, incredible miracle. Part of me kind of laughs because I'm like, well, a lot of these guys probably, they saw the parting of the Red Sea. So they're like, of course God can do this. But to be able to, again, just watch water be piled up before you, 40-mile-per-hour water waves just being stacked up against you on either side, and walking with your child or your animals or your possessions, just praying that it holds. I think it's incredible because I know how many of us right in this moment today have a Jordan in front of us, have a river that is just that's monumental, that just seems way too big. It stretches before us, and we know that there's challenges that are and will forever be too much for us. We cannot fix it on our own. We cannot cross it on our own. But God. How many of you, you've heard that phrase? It's just, but God. God makes the way. God parts the river. God calms the storm. God gives us the courage. God bears the load. No individual, no family, no church, no group of people, no state, no nation is too far gone for God. No one and nothing, no circumstance, no relationship, no situation, no decision, no sin, no diagnosis is too far gone. As people who have seen and believe in the miraculous of God, we can say, bring on the Jordan rivers. Bring them on. No Jordan River, no miracles. No 40-mile-per-hour river pool, no display of power. No fear, no reliance. So what is your Jordan today? Be willing to admit to the Lord, what river do you need his power to cross? And then it's our job to do our part, right? Just like the Israelites, to follow his lead, to stand still, to clean ourselves before the Lord. With his help, with his power, with his might, he can and he will do it. So what I want us to do in our homes today, as we've read about this miracle of crossing the Jordan River, is two things. First is every home should have what we're calling a God jar. It's very fancy, my little label maker here. And some sticky notes and a Sharpie. And there'll be some music playing in the background. And what we would like for you to do is just take a moment, reflect. Maybe you already know, it came to your head right away. And ask God, ask yourself, ask your spouse if you want, what's my Jordan right now? Not what it was, not what maybe it'll be, but what right now. And it might not seem that big to you, but you know that you need to cross it. And I want you to write that down, and you're going to fold it up and you're going to put it in this God jar. Don't worry, you don't need to put your name on it. We're not all going to go around and open them up and read them. But this is a symbol for you, for us, to be able to say, God, I submit my Jordan to you. This is yours. I'm relying on you to lead the way. Like the Ark of the Covenant, I will follow you across. And then we're going to take communion together. After everyone's had a chance to do that and you've put those in the jar, go ahead and hosts and leads, please lead your church in communion in whatever way feels comfortable for you, whether that's a group prayer or an individual time. But just remember that this moment of being able to take communion together is admitting our need, our reliance on the Lord, and then also celebrating that we have a Father who loves us and that wants to help us go through the challenges of life. We are not alone, and he came, Emmanuel, God with us, so that we would never have to do it on our own. We celebrate that as we take the bread and the juice today. So go ahead, home church, and let's break out and do those two things together, and we'll see you back here next week.